Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Risk with Dr. Naveen Agarwal. Each week, we talk about a topic related to risk management of medical devices in a very casual and informal way. This is not a webinar or lecture. Rather, our goal is to talk about key topics and challenges in a very informal way and share best practices. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and I'm the principal and founder at Achieve, where my personal mission is to help you achieve success in risk management. In this episode, I'm joined by Phil Deming. He is currently a human factors engineer at a highly innovative startup company working on augmented reality applications in the medical device space. In our conversation, we are focusing on special considerations for human factors engineering when it comes to these cutting-edge innovative technologies. Not only from a regulatory compliance point of view, but also usability and user adoption point of view. Phil has 20 years of experience in the consumer electronics space before he came to the medical device industry. So he's the best person to bring this unique perspective, balance of usability and user adoption with regulatory compliance in this conversation. We had this discussion in front of a live audience as part of our weekly LinkedIn Live audio series. You're about to hear a recording of our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to our weekly Let's Talk Risk conversation. My name is Naveen Agarwal, and I'm so excited to see all of you today. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Phil Deming to our conversation to talk about human factors, especially in the context of a very amazing, I say mind-blowing technology that he has been working on recently. But an important fact about Phil is that he spent 20 years in the consumer electronics industry. And he looked at usability engineering from a totally different way than we do in our medical device industry. So I can't wait to talk to him about his transition, his experience, and also what he has been doing about this technology and what can we learn from it. So with that, Phil, so excited to have you. Thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Davian. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Phil, I want to ask you first, you spend so much time in consumer electronics and then you transition into medical devices. And the first question I had for you was, what were some of the main differences you saw in our industry when we approach human factors versus how usability is seen and worked on in the consumer electronics industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So to Navia's point, spent about 20 years in consumer electronics and got into it because I love electronics, I love technology, and I found that in my 20 years while doing that, I spent a lot of time with human beings and people that had a limited understanding of the tech, and so I was able to see how they understood it and help them to understand it in a better way. So with consumer electronics, it's not a regulatory requirement to do a lot of human factors or any kind of usability, but it comes out of necessity because if the manufacturers are selling a product or creating a product that is not easy to use, then the product will be returned, and therefore it's not a good income for the manufacturer. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the medical field, it's obviously a regulatory requirement, and therefore we have a lot of upfront work we want to do to make sure that the system is easy to use and safe and effective, in the words of most human factors individuals. But yeah, it's very different in the way that consumer electronics is compared to the medical world. The medical world, very regulatory, a lot of reports, a lot of documentation, whereas on the consumer side, they reach out and ask for a lot of feedback prior to.
Yeah. So Phil, as you transition into this industry, I'm very curious to learn what was your initial challenge that you had to overcome?
The initial challenges was in the all regulatory ISO standards and whatnot, and FDA standards. Had to learn those very quickly. Whereas in the consumer electronics world, there isn't really a set standard, right, mm-hmm. on usability. It's all kind of I don't want to say willy-nilly, but it's kind of figured out as they go. Mm-hmm. And but that's the main difference for me is learning those standards and applying them in the correct order too, right? There's a very specific order in human factors that you want to follow to make sure that the product is developed in the correct way.
Perfect. So guys, I want to go into the technology that Phil has been working on. But before I get there, you will see a link posted in the comments section of this event page. The very first link, actually, if you click on that and watch that brief animation, it'll give you a little bit of a perspective of what we're talking about. So, Phil, can you please tell us about what this technology is and why you are so excited about it?
Absolutely, yes. So I work for a company called MetaView XR. We are a semi-startup, been around for a good amount of time, but we have developed a way to visualize in three-dimensional space human anatomy. And if you look at the link, you'll see a branch of arteries. And in 2D space, it's very hard to see where the branches stem from, if they're off the main branch, if they're secondary branches and whatnot. And if you're placing, as an example, a stent during surgery, it'd be very hard to see where the best route is. And this 3D visualization helps to plan far, far easier and have a far better outcome than it would on a 2D image. Mm-hmm. Most times a physician will look at it from one or two vantage points and not be able to literally twist around the branch, as you can see in the link, in the way that he was to better plan.
Interesting. So how do you get this image in the first place?
Absolutely, yeah. So what we do is we do what's called a preoperative CT scan of the patient. We place what's called fiducial markers, which are kind of markers that allow us to mark points in space later on. And then we upload that 3D image to what's called a HoloLens 2, augmented reality system. And we have that paired with an ultrasound system. And then we are able to see in 3 dimensions that anatomy using the CT scan.
Very interesting. So, guys, I hope you guys are excited about this technology as I am. To me, it's literally mind-blowing. I mean, come on, you are giving us so much visualization. I think the surgeon can be a lot more effective. So, Phil, when you started working on this, what were some of the top 2 or 3 human factors considerations in your mind that you were thinking about?
Yeah, being that we've been very used to a keyboard and a mouse and a 2D monitor, having our users get used to the idea of their hands floating out there and being able to interact with the image specifically, and using virtual keyboards and selecting through menus, right, is the main difference. So this allows a person to take an anatomy, for example, and literally twist it around. So you don't have to literally walk around it as you see in the recording here. Mm-hmm. You can take the image and manipulate it with your hands, twist it, turn it, and put it in any orientation that you want. So that's the main difference that I found. Another one is the wow factor. We still haven't figured out what to call it, but everybody says, "Oh, this is so cool!" Every time you look at a augmented reality image through a HoloLens. Cool doesn't really describe what you're getting out of it, mm-hmm. and unfortunately, it's one of those things you have to actually experience to truly understand. So if you had a virtual reality headset, you might have a limited understanding, but being able to see a virtual image laid over the real world, which is what augmented reality is a mind-blowing, very different experience. So that's the main thing. So
what were some of the couple of top 2 or 3 use-related risks that you guys were worried about, and how did you take care of them?
So we were, as I mentioned before, we were leveraging the HoloLens, and they have their own control control capabilities. Mm-hmm. And so learning how to essentially control the virtual mouse. And that was in 3 forms. Using your hand, you can do what's called a near interaction. We're actually reaching out and grabbing an image and maneuvering it, right? The other one was what's called a far interaction, where you might be 2, 3, 4, or even 5 feet away from an image, and being able to manipulate it, grab it from afar and manipulate it. And then the third one was a visual confirmation. So we have what's called eye gaze built into the headset. And so you can essentially gaze at a button or a feature and issue a voice command to activate that feature. So we're 3 very different ways of interacting with the system that were different than what we're used to.
Oh, that's really interesting. I hope, guys, you will have a lot of questions and comments about this. I can't wait to hear from you. But before I start inviting people for a discussion here, Phil, I had just one general question for you, just in terms of where the whole field of human factors is going. We see so much technology coming in. Artificial intelligence is also going to be a part of it now. So as you see technology exploding like crazy, where this whole field is going and how we as practitioners can prepare for it, do you have any thoughts and advice for that?
Yeah, as I'm doing right now, research. So going in and actually talking to users in the intended environment is key. Understanding their workflow, and then melding that workflow with the system, making sure the system isn't too cumbersome with that workflow, right? Most physicians, as a lot of us know, are very particular about their workflows. And if we change that too much, they won't want to adopt the system. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the main things that I work on is early research and implementing what they want into our system.
Well, isn't that interesting? It's all about humans, right? Less about technology, but more about humans. Awesome. So guys, I see Ravikant and Rafael, you have already joined us, but I just want to let you guys know, especially those of you who are new, you're welcome to join this, what I call virtual stage, just by raising your hand virtually like you see some of our colleagues doing. I believe there might be a button at the bottom right of your screen. You can request to speak and I'll bring you on. And you don't have to wait your turn, like, several people have indicated. So we have a very good number of people here. So I'm going to start with Ravikant. You were first. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Thank you very much, Naveen. And thanks, Phil, for your beautiful explanation of what you're doing. My question is related to the boundaries. Like, I know you're developing this technology to virtually visualize the anatomy of the body, which is great. But I don't think you'll be building from scratch. So you'll be using the technology already available, for example, the AR set or visualization. There are a lot of things already available in market. I hope you will be integrating your software or, with the AR that's already available in market. Now, as a general purpose, the AR sets are generally built for a general purpose, not specific to medical purpose. So what kind of risks you see, when you're integrating such a complicated things to a generically built devices? And any few considerations that you would like to share?
Yeah, to your point, we are leveraging off-the-shelf hardware for our system, but the software is completely custom. We integrate, so when you do a CT scan, there's a OBJ file that's output, and we leverage that in our augmented reality. But to answer your question, we've been developing this for quite a while, and we had obviously quite a few iterations that we worked on, and it's come to the point where it is today. But a lot of the risks were based on some in the beginning was set up of the system, making sure that these off-the-shelf items work together correctly. So that's what a technologist would work on. And then after that, the physician making sure that the UI was intuitive to use, right? And so we used a lot of their feedback to help develop our system and where button placement should be and whatnot to reduce risk and making sure that also everything was easy to read. But yeah, it was really working with the users to make sure that the risk was reduced as much as possible.
Excellent point. Thank you, Phil. All right, Rafael, you are next. Please go ahead and share what you have in mind.
Hi, Phil. Yeah, it's interesting because talking about your own journey, and it reminded me of my own in a lot of regards, because I ended up working on a massive human factors clinical trial to prove that a home hearing test that we were working on was good enough to determine if someone had a hearing impairment, more to the point, a disabling one. And that was human factors on a whole other level as well, because fitting hearing aids is about working with a system we really don't understand, with a lot of human factors involved as well in terms of how the body responds to the stimulus. And so getting that was a whole other ball of wax, and it was a trial by fire that in a lot of ways reminded me of what you described.
Yeah, Yeah, excellent.
It's funny you mentioned that. So my bridge from consumer electronics into human factors was I was working in an underwriter's laboratories on a medical device they wanted to use in the house, right? And I did a little bit of research before starting my usability study and found all these, again, ISO standards and whatnot. I found that I was way over my head.
Yeah.
had to ask for help from, luckily, we had a subsidiary called Amerigo by UL that's part of UL, and I was able to incorporate them into the usability study and was able to get through it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, these home-based healthcare is also going to explode in the near future, right? And usability and human factors is going to become even more important. So let's continue our conversation on that note. Bijan, you are next. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Hi, Naveen.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Bijan.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Phil. Very interesting. One thing I'm curious is about the reliability of this visualization software. And my thinking is that would it be reliable enough to be used in surgery on a robotic surgeon or surgical robot? So, for example, the manipulation, could it be that software could be used to maybe activate by gaze a command? So the surgeon would look at a button and say, for example, cut to the right. Would it actually do what it said?
Yes, very, very good question. So I do have to put this disclaimer in there. Our system is intended to be adjunctive, meaning that they have to keep with the standard of care. So when they're doing a procedure, they still have to look at the actual 2D monitor to verify before they do an ablate or a biopsy, right? The system here, as of right now, is meant for more planning trajectory, as an example. So the link that we sent here is more of a visualization software. We have another system that actually has tracked ablation needles and ultrasound. And the system is intended to help with planning a trajectory for a needle, for example. Not to say that we wouldn't go that route eventually that you're talking about, get into robotics. The system does have a telepresence option too, which is something I didn't even mention. The ability to essentially looking at a patient with the headset on, and you can kind of remote in or ask for assistance from a fellow colleague. They can pull up their computer or their tablet and be able to see exactly what the physician is seeing, right? So robotics is another thing that absolutely is a possibility. Not saying we're looking at that or going to proceed with that, but that is absolutely a possibility. We would have to figure out the aspect of human interaction, between the headset and the robotics if we go that route.
But you see, I think these technologies are sort of evolving and may converge at some point, right? So, Bijan, did you have any other thoughts or questions in mind on this?
Just a thought. I actually had the privilege of participating in one of these telepresence surgeries where I had this headset. I was in Europe and the surgeon was in America, and I was able to actually be inside the belly of a patient while they were doing a surgery. It was amazing. And I was talking to the surgeon at the same time. He was explaining to me what he was doing. It was just mind-blowing.
Oh, that is incredible. Yes. Well, I mean, on this note, Phil, I think what we're talking about here is almost like a digital twin technology here, right? We are trying to visualize first before we do the operation. And this brings to mind another new technology that has come to assist, this device placements inside your arteries. I think that there was something from FEOPS, I believe that was the name of the company. I reviewed it very recently. But the whole idea of having a digital twin, is that, am I thinking about it the right way? This is where the technology is going for now?
It's not a necessity, right? So if we find that if the physician finds that there's maybe they have a little bit less experience or an area that is just not sure about, they can call in for kind of a help. Mm-hmm. It's not intended for primary use. It's just more of a feature that's that's added to the system.
Yeah, and we are expecting better surgical outcomes because of these technologies.
Of course.
That's what it was.
Of course.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, I know you have been waiting patiently, so please go ahead and unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Thanks, Naveen. Good morning, and good morning, Phil. Wow, this is really exciting technology. It's fun to hear about it. It's interesting and really great what you said about surgeons wanting to use the system and how that's an important human factors consideration. And I saw an insightful point, it was on LinkedIn this week, pointing out the human factors as compared to just usability engineering does include more consideration for those psychological factors beyond just the scope of usability and use error. So what's your view on IEC 62366 versus sort of the scope of human factors and they can sort of, how they can work together or help each other?
Yes. So human factors, the way I like to think about it, it's more about the human. Every person has a different way of looking at a certain thing, right? And it's based on their experience, what they've learned, and the fun part about human factors is being able to create a device that is, of course, easy and effective to use, but is also usable by a wide range of users. And so taking into account those different experiences and the way they might look at a system is important. So it's not just a clear-cut, follow these rules according to 62366. It's also, mitigating risk from different aspects of how the user perceives the system.
Do you think that 62366 sort of is lacking in that respect? Do you think that the FDA human factors guidance does actually add on, or do you think it's actually captured there in 62366?
You make a good point. I'm actually in the works of documentation within the company of combining the two, because yes, I do believe that FDA's guidance has some of those more human factors aspects than 62366. I feel like that melding the two together and kind of using both of them in tandem is my best practice as of right now.
Yeah, I'd say that too. I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say about that, actually.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, by the way, this conversation, Chris, thank you for bringing this up, because it clarified in my mind now the essential difference between usability and human factors. I mean, I've been personally very confused by that. To me, it looks like human factors is a lot more than simple usability and thinking about people and adoption. And not only just safe use, but adoption, right? How will they use it, and how will they actually, it might become a habit for them. So, Phil, can you say a little bit more about the differences between the FDA guidance that you just referred to and IEC 62366?
Yeah, some key points are, as an example, the FDA guidance has a kind of a not really a roadmap, or it has I think a better description of how to look at risk. Whereas the 62366 tends to be more, at least in my mind, not robotic,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely more of a list that you follow, right? There's a lot more for human considerations and human factor in the FDA guidance in my mind, and it's again good to follow both, because especially if you're going to be a manufacturer that's going to deploy to more than just the U.S. Which we are. We're going to be going to the EU eventually with a couple of systems. So we obviously followed FDA's guidance, and then we're also adding in 62366 and a couple of small variations. So as an example, one main difference is that the FDA guidance doesn't have what's called a user interface specification plan, whereas the 62366 does. So they want a plan of how you're going to evaluate the user interface, which is, hard to do, right? Because especially augmented reality, user interface is very different than anything else that's out there. Mm-hmm. You're not really just looking at button size, colors, and whatnot. You actually have to think about it three-dimensionally too. Yeah. So yeah, there are quite a few differences.
Excellent point.
If I could just
go ahead, Chris.
Well.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thanks. Yeah, that one thing I find when reading the IEC document, it can be a little bit deceptive, especially if you're new, and it appears very much like that document is referring to software user interface. Because the term interface, from an engineering background, it's not often used for physical sort of tactile things like mechanisms, or say you've got a label or a graduation. These are examples of interface. Mm-hmm. But we grow up with the feeling that this is related to software. And a lot of the language in 62366 does sound like that's what it's talking about. I mean, if you read it through completely, it does become clear that it's more than just that. But it can be deceptive at the beginning. And I don't feel like there's the same pitfall in the FDA guidance on it.
Absolutely agree. And I had the same difficulty in the beginning going through 62366. It seemed that it was really just software. But later on, when you realize that the definition of interface is anything a human will interface with or view or touch, right? Anything. It could be it could be hardware, it could be software, it could be labeling. It's your point too. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I had the same difficulty.
Thank you for bringing that up, Chris, and I appreciate this conversation. Guys, we still have 5 minutes, so the floor is open. Please participate, whatever you have in mind, question, comment, suggestion, any challenges that you face in your practice. Can be a very general conversation as well. And if you so desire, just raise your hand virtually and I'll bring you on stage. With that, we'll keep going, guys. So Ravi, Bijan, Rafael, Chris, any other question, comments in your mind, please let me know.
I'm having fun with this conversation.
Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
So if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead.
Sort of, bring it back to my first question there about having an idea of whether your user wants to use the product. I think this is something that this level of human factors discussion does bring into this. It's really important because if you're making a product from an engineering, you guys continue.
No problem. So, Phil, actually, I want to bring back the discussion that we just started early on from a consumer electronics point of view. Usability or user experience is more of a competitive business advantage, is it not? And from a medical device point of view, we focus so much on compliance that maybe sometimes we forget that human aspect of it. How can we bridge this gap in the mindset and understanding? Can you share any thoughts on that?
That's a very good question. I've worked for a consultancy and a couple of manufacturers now, and it depends on the people that work for the company, essentially. And a lot of them, it is a checkbox, right? And I found that for me, in all those various aspects of different manufacturers, consultancy and whatnot, is basically speaking up and talking about the human interaction portion of it. And these are human beings that are using the system, not robots, right? Mm-hmm. And engineers tend to think of the hardware and software from a robotic standpoint, that, true, false statements and mm-hmm. whatnot. And they don't realize that. So similar to, I'm not going to go that route. I was going to go into quantum mechanics, but they have gray areas, right? And there are those gray areas are the areas that are really interesting to me, and the parts we have to bring up that it's not just a true false statement all the time. There's going to be a gray area that we have to think about. And in my experience is because I have so much time in the world with consumer electronics and dealing with people and technology in their homes, there's always going to be a way they're going to think about how to break a system or a thing. And getting that point across to the engineers is they're not trying to do it on purpose. It's just because they don't understand the technology, right? Yeah. But we have to also mitigate those risks. Yeah. And think about those risks too. And so just talking about that has helped me quite a bit.
And also, I think that, of course, this is all good conversation, but as you and I were chatting briefly before we went live, think about what Apple has done to the world of consumer electronics. It has changed the way we interact with a electronic device. And now it's becoming a habit, mainstream. Consumer experience is completely revolutionized. And think about all this AR and artificial intelligence coming into medical devices. Could we not make it in a way that makes people love them instead of being afraid of them? I think that's the point I'm trying to kind of consider for our discussion, that as engineers, you are right, we get so focused on functionality and making it work reliably. But there is emotional side of human factors in my mind that I think we should not forget. Do you have any comments on that, Phil?
Yeah. I absolutely agree with your comment. There's more than just how the system is going to work. It's how it's going to be perceived from a user standpoint, and just taking that into consideration. Luckily, the company that I work for, MetaView, is very good at actually caring about what the users think about it and making sure that it's easy to use for mm-hmm. a wide range of people.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Well, fascinating conversation, guys, and we are almost running against the clock here. So I'm going to give Phil just a couple of minutes to, collect his thoughts and share some key takeaways with us. But in the meantime, again, very few announcements here. The first thing is that next week we're going to have a very interesting conversation about IVD risk management, and Claudia is here in the audience. I really look forward to that conversation. Please show up 11 o'clock again. The announcement will go out today on LinkedIn. So again, show up and be a part of that discussion. I'm sure IVD risk management is challenging in many ways, and we learn a lot of interesting stuff with that. Second thing that I want to tell you guys is I have launched a brand new section on Let's Talk Risk. First of all, those of you who don't know about the Let's Talk Risk newsletter and website, there's the link in this event section where you can go and check it out. And all the recordings of our conversations are on Let's Talk Risk. But the new section that I have launched is on business acumen. And we want to help QA/RA colleagues not only get better from a technical, functional point of view, but also grow and build their business acumen. That is the goal. So I hope you will find it interesting. Go check it out. The launch announcement is already there, and learn about it. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please reach out to me. With that, I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And now I want to invite Phil for some closing comments.
Yeah, just a couple two key points. one around human factors, and the other one about augmented reality in general. The first one for human factors is keep an open mind while working to understand human behavior. Never assume that you know more than your users. We had a situation where we were looking at some labeling, and we had some people that were not physicians come in and wanted to review the labeling. And I made a comment that I felt like that I would love to hear their point of view, and finding those odd understandings is mouthwatering to me. That's where the interesting part comes in. Mm-hmm. Kind of going to the point where, getting away from the true false statements, that there's the in-betweens, right? And even people that aren't using the technology might have some insight on some features or fixes or ways to mitigate risk within the system. So that's my one point. Second point around AR. We've seen a lot of companies that are coming in with their headsets, and some of them are kind of lesser expensive, some of them are more expensive. I feel like that we're at the point right now where people think AR is this cool, neat feature, but AR has a lot of capability and a lot of way to understand our world in a simulated environment. And I'm a very visual person, and one of the reasons why I like working here is I'm able to see now inside a human body with augmented reality without having to open up a human body. And I have a far better understanding now of how the human body works. And AR brought that to me. Mm-hmm. AR can bring many of the aspects of understanding to all of us. And I'm just excited to see it blossom within the next couple of years.
Oh, that's so exciting, Phil. Thank you for sharing this with us. I'm personally excited. Guys, how are you feeling? Show me your response using the emoji icons at the bottom of your screen. Show me how you're feeling, if it is interesting or useful to you. And actually, I want to invite you to reach out to me with any comments or questions or feedback you might have. Because, guys, at the end of the day, this is for you. This is for all of us to get together, learn about these topics in an interesting, casual way, and be a part of this community. So reach out to me anytime if you have any suggestions, or if you want to participate as a guest speaker. No preparation required. It's very simple, very easy. With that, guys, thanks a lot again for being a part of this discussion today. Thank you, Phil. Thanks, Ravi, Rafael, Chris, and Bijan for participating so openly and candidly and contributing to this discussion. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Naveen. Thank you, everybody.